When military history enthusiasts talk about the great bolt-action rifles of the 20th century, the conversation usually starts with the Mauser 98, and for good reason. It set the standard for strength, safety, and accuracy. But there's a misconception embedded in that preference that overlooks something critical. The Mauser was arguably the better rifle from an engineering standpoint. The Lee-Enfield, however, was the better weapon, and those are two very different things. The difference lies not in what the rifle could do on a bench rest, but in what it enabled a soldier to do under the chaos of close-quarters battle. While the German army equipped its soldiers with a technically superior action, the British soldier went to war with a rifle that prioritized one thing above all else: the volume of aimed fire a single man could deliver. The Lee-Enfield didn't win battles because it was the most accurate or the strongest. It won because it turned the ordinary infantryman into something his enemy often mistook for a machine gunner. To understand this rifle, you have to understand that its greatest contribution wasn't metallurgy, it was tactics. The Lee-Enfield's bolt system was designed for the human hand, not just the cartridge. The Mauser action requires a 90-degree lift of the bolt handle to cycle. The Lee-Enfield, 60 degrees. That might sound like a minor difference, but multiply it by 10 rounds. Under stress, with adrenaline flooding your system, and it becomes a decisive advantage. The bolt lugs are located at the rear of the bolt body rather than the front, which allowed designers to place the bolt handle much closer to the shooter's trigger hand. You don't have to break your grip or shift your position to cycle the action. You keep your cheek welded to the stock, your eye on the target, and your hand moving in a short, efficient arc. This was not an accident. It was a design philosophy that prioritized sustained, aimed fire over theoretical mechanical perfection. The helical locking surfaces, interrupted threading technically, also meant the bolt closure was smooth, distributing cam action across the entire mating face. The rifle was designed to be worked fast and worked hard, without beating up the shooter in the process. The 10-round magazine fundamentally changed what a rifle squad could do. When the Lee-Enfield was adopted, most military rifles held 5 rounds. The Mauser held 5, the Springfield held 5, the Mosin Nagant held 5, the Lee-Enfield held 10. That doesn't just mean you could fire twice as many rounds before reloading. It means the rhythm of combat shifted. A German soldier firing a Mauser had to reload after every 5 shots, creating a natural pause in his engagement. The British soldier with an SMLE could engage multiple targets, adjust fire, and keep shooting, while his enemy was fumbling for another charger clip. And when he did need to reload, the charger guide in the receiver allowed him to strip 5 rounds into the magazine in seconds. The magazine itself was detachable, though doctrine discouraged removing it, the fear being soldiers would lose them in the field. But the capacity was there, built into the weapon's design, and it changed how firepower was distributed at the squad level. One man with an Enfield could generate more lead downrange in a minute than 2 men with almost any other bolt-action rifle of the era. The Mad Minute was not a party trick, it was a battlefield necessity. The famous Mad Minute exercise, where a rifleman fired at a target at 300 yards for 60 seconds, was designed to demonstrate what was possible. The record, set in 1914 by Sergeant Instructor Snoxel, was 38 rounds into a 12-inch target. But the tactical value went beyond range competitions. In the opening months of World War II, during the retreat from Mons and the stand at Ypres, German infantry advanced in dense formations, confident in their numbers and their own rifles. They reported facing machine gun fire, when in fact they were advancing against disciplined British regulars, firing Enfields. The volume of fire was that deceptive. The Germans, trained to believe bolt-action rifles were inherently slow, could not reconcile what they were walking into. The lesson here for the student of warfare is simple. rate of fire is a form of suppression. If the enemy believes they cannot expose themselves without being hit, it does not matter whether the weapon firing is automatic or manual. The effect on their behavior is the same. The .303 British cartridge was designed to do damage the way infantry needed it to. The Mark 7 round, introduced in 1910 alongside the SMLE Mark III, had a peculiar design feature. The bullet was full metal jacket, complying with Hague Convention restrictions, but the construction was not uniform. The front portion of the core was aluminum or wood pulp, with the lead core positioned toward the base. This shifted the center of gravity rearward. Upon impact, the bullet would yaw and often tumble, transferring energy far more effectively than a stable, non-expanding projectile normally would. It was a legal way to increase stopping power without violating the laws of war. The round also benefited from the switch to cordite propellant years earlier, which increased velocity over the old black powder loads. At the muzzle, the Mark 7 delivered over 2,400 feet per second and roughly 2,300 foot-pounds of energy. It was a flat-shooting, hard-hitting cartridge that remained effective well past 500 yards. The rifle and the round matured together, and that synergy really mattered. The Lee-Enfield adapted to new wars without losing its identity. By the time World War II began, the SMLE Mark III had been in service for over 30 years. It was replaced in production by the No. 4 rifle, which featured a heavier barrel, a stronger action, and an aperture rear sight mounted on the receiver rather than the barrel. The aperture sight improved accuracy for average marksmen by providing a longer sight radius and a more precise aiming picture, but the action remained the same. The bolt still threw 60 degrees, the magazine still held 10, the rifle still fed from charger clips. Later in the war, the No. 5 Mark I, the so-called jungle carbine, was developed for the Pacific Theater. It was lighter, shorter, and handier in dense vegetation. It also kicked harder and developed a reputation for a wandering zero. The wandering zero phenomenon often blamed on lightning cuts in the receiver. But it proved that the Enfield platform could be modified for specific environments without a complete redesign. The rifle fought in every theater, from the freezing mud of Korea to the deserts of North Africa to the islands of the South Pacific. The Lee-Enfield outlasted its issue date because it was never truly obsolete. Britain officially replaced the Lee-Enfield with the L1A1 SLR in 1957. But replacement and removal are not the same thing. The Enfield remained in service well into the 1960s for regular units and far longer for reserve and colonial forces. The L42A1 Sniper variant, built on No. 4 actions and rechambered in 7.62 NATO, served until the 1990s. The rifle factory Ishapur in India continued producing Enfields in 7.62mm well after Britain stopped. Even today, the Lee-Enfield remains in limited official service with some police and paramilitary units, making it one of the longest-serving bolt-action rifles in history. That kind of longevity does not happen by accident. It happens because the design was right the first time. It was robust enough to handle decades of hard use, simple enough to be manufactured in multiple countries under wartime conditions, and effective enough that soldiers trusted it. The Lee-Enfield teaches us something about the difference between a collector's piece and a weapon of war. The Mauser is beautiful in its precision. The Springfield is elegant in its simplicity. But the Enfield was built for a specific purpose, to put more lead on target faster than the other guy could manage. It was designed around the limits of human physiology and the realities of infantry combat. It recognized that, in a firefight, the man who can fire 20 aimed rounds in a minute has an advantage over the man who can only fire 15, even if the 15 come from a technically superior action. That lesson, that the weapon is only as good as the tactical doctrine it enables, is worth remembering. Because the next time someone tells you that a rifle is defined by its accuracy or its action strength, You can ask them how many rounds they can put into a target at 300 yards in 60 seconds. And then you can tell them about the men who did it with an Enfield and made the Germans think they were facing machine guns. If you value this kind of in-depth historical analysis, make sure you're subscribed to Warmer China. We dig into the details that the overviews ignore. Hit the subscribe button and share this video with someone who needs to understand why the right tool for the job isn't always the one that looks best on paper.